hello, grappling fans. It is another episode of your favorite Jiu-Jitsu podcast, Fistful of Collars, and it's myself, Howell T, joined by this man right here, the man himself, the cameraman.
This guy over here.
Kind of freaking me out a bit doing something with his chest, but
I was giving a shout out to Jiu-Jitsu versus everybody. That's what we're gonna talk about today, right?
Reed Connell, Jiu-Jitsu versus everybody. We're going to do talking about Jiu-Jitsu versus something or other. That's right. Rocking the brand new FloGrappling t-shirt or Flow Sports t-shirt is Ryan Smith, and on the end, Kenya Boys Jiu-Jitsu Club.
We can't see.
Look at that.
This guy
All the way from
down
Japan.
there, boys.
Chase Smith rocking the Japan special exclusive t-shirt. Look at that.
Thanks for the drop, Kenya. Got that at ADCC. Very
Pretty
cool.
dope, right?
Yes.
So, Jiu-Jitsu versus everybody. That was kind of a theme, though, right? At ADCC not too long ago.
Well, I guess that seems to be a hot topic going on in the world these days, right? Maybe Nicky Rod was one of the guys who kind of kicked off this little debate. And then we had, of course, last week.
Hang on, but it's Nick Rodriguez.
Rodriguez.
Is he Jiu-Jitsu or is he everybody?
He's Jiu-Jitsu. Yeah. He's
okay.
Jiu-Jitsu.
He's one of us now.
He's one of us, for sure. Whether I don't know if he's claiming it or not, but we're claiming him.
We're claiming him.
Yeah. I think he's a Jiu-Jitsu
I
guy.
want Nicky Rod on my team,
right?
That's for sure.
Definitely not against him. So.
But and then he went out there and did a wrestling match against Pat Downey over the weekend, and so I feel like it's kicked up a lot of fervor about Jiu-Jitsu, about wrestling, about different martial arts, about different rule sets, about who's got the best, who's the toughest, that type of thing, right?
Right.
Is that the
So one thing that we wanted to talk about today was Jiu-Jitsu versus wrestling specifically, because grappling tournaments, we call them grappling, but pretty much they're just Jiu-Jitsu tournaments, right? There aren't that many tournaments where you actually get grapplers from different styles coming together. ADCC is like pretty much the only exception, where you do have guys come in primarily as a wrestler. You don't even have any other judo styles any other grappling styles represented, like judo or sambo anymore.
There used to be a judo guy in there, right? The Japanese plus 99 dude. He was in there for a few years.
Satoshi Ishii?
Shrek. Shrek.
I heard Satoshi Ishii was like the next guy to get an invite, basically, if somebody pulled out, but nobody pulled out. So what do you guys think? Are we in this camp that that ADCC is not a jiu-jitsu tournament? Like like very black and white. It's not a jiu-jitsu tournament.
I know what I think, but I want to hear what these guys think.
You got to change your strategy. I think it's a submission grappling tournament, and you could almost honestly argue, I think, better that no-gi isn't jiu-jitsu more than ADCC isn't jiu-jitsu. I think no-gi is such a different game from gi grappling at this point. You could call them two different sports. Maybe I'm copying out my answer here, but I think it is basically a jiu-jitsu tournament. You just have to wrestle. You have to know the rules, and you have to wrestle a little bit, especially in overtime. So, yeah, it's jiu-jitsu, but there's more wrestling.
I think hearing from John Donaher not too long ago, he was talking about if the belts used to matter, but now you got guys like Nick Rodriguez coming out. Maybe it doesn't matter so much.
The best purple belt in the world now, maybe.
Yeah.
Let me qualify one thing, though. I do know that the ADCC Federation does not call it a jiu-jitsu tournament. They call it submission wrestling.
Actually,
that is their
submission fighting.
Submission fighting. That's their official stance, but my personal stance is basically a jiu-jitsu tournament.
Go ahead. What are you going to say?
No, ADCC absolutely is not a jiu-jitsu tournament.
I mean, and
I think
pretty close to a jiu-jitsu tournament,
It's a grappling tournament dominated by jiu-jitsu practitioners. I think that's the best way, because it is not a jiu-jitsu tournament in the traditional sense, It's a no-gi submission wrestling, and they call it submission fighting because the idea was, bear in mind, the ADCC was created in the late 90s, still in the era of like no-holds-barred fighting, when it was like style against style. And it was influenced by that debate at the time. Well, MMA or no-holds-barred, whatever you want to call it, back then was like, which is the best martial arts style? And ADCC was, we're going to do the same thing, which is the best grappling style. And it turned out it was jiu-jitsu. Surprise, surprise, right? But since then, that has become distilled, and just like MMA guys now, you rarely find like a pure kind of stylist of any one shape or form. They're all hybrid fighters. It's the same with grappling tournaments now. They became hybrid grapplers, so wrestlers learn jiu-jitsu and vice versa. But once in a while, you have an outlier. Once in a while, you have a guy come in who kind of bucks that trend. And it's been a long time since we've seen one. In fact, I'm racking my brain as to how far back you have to go in ADCC history to find somebody who was, as pure or as predominantly a representative of one style or other, wasn't jiu-jitsu. And man, you have to go way back, maybe to the early 2000s, to find somebody like that. So somebody like a Mark Kerr.
I'm trying to think as well, because I feel like it's like, Nicky Rod went out there, he did so well, and I feel like everybody's like, oh man, just a wrestler, all you gotta need is a wrestler to go in that tournament and they can win it. But I feel like it's not quite that easy, right? I mean, just ask Ben Askren, I feel like Nicky,
ask Chael. Chael's done it a couple times.
Ask Chael, for sure.
Well, 2003, there were a couple of wrestlers who came in. Chael was actually in that ADCC, right? 2003. We randomly saw his name in the brackets, and we were like, wait, what? Yeah. It was before he was even like a known MMA fighter. He somehow made it to ADCC. But there was another guy, and you'll remember this name, Reed, because Marcelo talked about him a little bit, and that's Otto Olsen. And he made it to the finals of the 77 kilogram division in the 2003 ADCC down in Sao Paulo, Brazil, and he was predominantly a wrestler. And so once in a while,
Scandinavian. He was like
no, he's American.
He was American.
Yeah. This is the crazy thing, because that was kind of before my time. I'll be honest. 2003.
Yeah,
I didn't really know too much about the sort of the ins and outs. I knew who the big champs were and stuff, but I didn't know all the random guys in ADCC. And Otto Olsen, he was a wrestler from Washington, and he's one of the best wrestlers in the history of Washington wrestling, apparently. So.
Beat Daniel Moraes. I remember Marcelo talking about him. Beat Daniel Moraes, and then made it to the ADCC finals.
That's pretty wild. I feel like Nicky Rod is the embodiment of like a high-level wrestler that comes in and learns just enough jiu-jitsu to be untouchable. You can't submit him, but he's still kind of relying on that wrestling athleticism and heart and just like grind. But I think going back to the Pat Downey match recently, I don't think if you allowed submissions in that format, in that tournament, that Nick's going to submit Pat Downey. He's not quite there on the submission level yet.
Well, we say that, but we're kind of assuming there that Pat knows how to defend a submission.
It's true.
Because even a guy with a rudimentary guillotine choke could catch a wrestler as they're coming in for a last double, right?
It's a great experience, I feel like, going to a wrestling room and then being like, oh yeah, let's do some chokes and stuff like that. Let's go.
That's true. Maybe
I feel like that's fun, because I feel like those wrestlers, they don't have the same wherewithal with people touching their neck and stuff like that. But yeah, I mean, Nicky training at John Danaher in the Blue Basement there, I mean, I think that did wonders for what he was able to do at ADCC.
Absolutely.
If you're going to go anywhere for a crash course in jiu-jitsu, that's the place to go, right?
Yeah. Definitely. But I mean, right? You were talking about this tournament. UFC being a tournament, and ADCC being. We wanted to try to find out what the best martial art is, the best grappling martial art. Like, we did this already.
Yeah.
Jiu-jitsu won. That's why I think that when people say like, oh, wrestling is better, or it just takes a wrestler to go in there to dominate, or we're still trying to figure this out. No, we already figured it all out.
We've already figured that out.
Like, that's why I think ADCC, like, I think you could say it's a jiu-jitsu tournament, because maybe back then, maybe it was a little bit more, trying to find the right martial art, but now it's jiu-jitsu. Jiu-jitsu dominates, right? Like, I feel like we got to remember that a little bit. Is my point, is that like jiu-jitsu has dominated, and if you don't do jiu-jitsu, then you're gonna lose.
Yeah, I really hope that wrestlers don't kind of get carried away and think that they could just walk in and start cleaning up in jiu-jitsu tournaments.
I hope they do the trials. I definitely.
Well, I would love to see them get involved, but there is going to have to be an investment on their part as to learning the jiu-jitsu, doing exactly what Nick Rodriguez did. Go into a high-level place, actually learning some legit grappling technique. Because, Ben Askren, he was an amazing wrestler at the time. Had he gone to the Olympics yet? He had, right?
Yeah. I think he'd just gone to the Olympics and was transitioning into MMA.
And then he goes to ADCC, and I think he didn't make it out of the first round, right?
I think he lost the first match.
There you
to
go.
Popovich.
So that was an Olympic-level wrestler, and he did not perform. So
one of the greatest college wrestlers of all time.
Yeah.
I don't know why you want these guys to get training and be prepared. I want those highlights coming in.
Well, actually, you mentioned something there, Chase, and I think that does spark a really, really good point. It's like, what would grappling in general look like if a wave of wrestlers came in, learned enough of the submission grappling game to survive, and then come in with their wrestling backgrounds? What would that look like? What would it do to the face of grappling?
I think it looked like the UFC. I mean, we see that in MMA, where we have high-level wrestlers moving into mixed martial arts, and they pick up enough of the submission game and the no-gi rule sets, and they know how to avoid those dangerous positions. I mean, wrestlers are among the most successful athletes in mixed martial arts today, and I think they would do really well. I mean, they have the raw components, the athleticism, the body control, and just they're very strong and hard to control, and especially in no-gi. So I think, you give them just a little bit of awareness on the leg locks and where not to put their neck. You have a really tough guy to deal with. You see it all the time in the gym. When a new wrestler comes in, they're for 2 months, they're bait. You're having a great time with them and they're getting frustrated, but then they learn your traps and now they're just a nightmare. They're still a white belt.
Yeah, no, I hear that, and I think you made a good point of what it's like to actually get your hands on that kind of the newbie wrestler in the gym. That it's fun at first because you're like, hey, let me give you the introduction to jiu-jitsu.
Oh, you're gonna take me down, huh?
Oh, great.
Welcome to a loop choke.
And then all of a sudden, it really does start getting very, very challenging. Ryan, what's your take on the whole of wrestlers? What's it like rolling with the wrestlers in the gym when they start picking up that game?
I mean, the first thought that came to my mind was, how clear Danaher's system has to be for Nick Erod to pick it up that fast. I think if you were to put Pat Downey or any high-level athlete into, under a coach like that, you would see them do very well at ADCC. So, I welcome them. I welcome the wrestlers. Let's bring it on.
What about your personal experience of training? Because I know you've trained at some high-level schools with some really, really good no-gi, and especially, some badass wrestlers coming into that room as well. So, what have you seen personally?
I was down there at Fight Sports, and Coach Manuel is a great wrestling coach, and all the guys down there put heavy emphasis on wrestling. And the guys that pick it up and really focus on wrestling, they're tough to deal with. But they do have blind spots, and so they're constantly trying to fix that.
That's where the leg locks come in.
Man, I remember one of the toughest training partners. He's passed on now. He's my old wrestling coach, but one of the toughest training partners I ever had was this guy, and we don't exactly have a strong wrestling culture in the UK, right? But there are some pockets of wrestling that kind of exist, and that certainly was true to the region where I lived, because that's kind of where the catch wrestlers came from. And I'm talking like way back, the actual legit sort of like the snake pit wrestling kind of style, where these guys were really traditional catch as catch can wrestlers before pro wrestling came along. And they knew submission holds, and they knew how to make your life an absolute misery on the mat. And they were extremely hard to catch, but they didn't play off their backs. They were like 100% top game guys. But I used to train with a guy regularly, and he would teach us wrestling, and we would work with him, and he would roll us and stuff. And the guy was able to learn things like the front headlock choke, anaconda, and then switching it to the DAS, and just a whole system of hanging off your neck with what are very common control positions in wrestling. And that if you roll with that guy, your neck be sore for a week, So there's certain things that in wrestling transition very, very well into submission grappling. But then, like you say, blind spots, right? These guys, what happens when the guy goes to his back and starts climbing the guard up? Wrestlers, they don't know that position. That's the kind of stuff that they really need to invest time in learning. They really need to invest time on protecting certain areas, their neck, their feet, and so on. But one thing about wrestling that I kind of find really interesting, though, is when you see guys with a wrestling background and they try to play jiu-jitsu, that's kind of usually when things don't go their way, right? If they wrestle first and they kind of almost ignore their opponent's jiu-jitsu game, that's kind of, is that right? Would you guys agree that seems to be when things go best for them?
In no-gi. In the gi, you can't ignore the jiu-jitsu.
I think we're talking about no-gi.
I'm just making sure we're talking about that.
No, 100%.
I feel like I see some, I've seen some wrestlers get a good leg lock game, and then they become really dangerous, right? Because you can't take them down.
10th Planet's got a few of those
I was
guys.
going to say, I was going to point out a guy like PJ Barch, who's like a really good wrestler. He's really tough to take down, but he also has that 10th Planet leg lock skills and stuff like that. So he can do both. He can play guard. But like, good luck taking him down. He wants you to try to shoot on him probably. So I feel like being a good wrestler and incorporating jiu-jitsu, man, it makes you just such a multi-level threat. Obviously, hating a little bit on wrestling, but I do love wrestling, and think that
you wrestled,
folding wrestling into your jiu-jitsu game obviously can only help, and there are some good aspects that I think can really help your jiu-jitsu game. But I do think like the main, like the best thing about wrestling is the mental toughness that you get
Yes.
from wrestling.
Yeah.
Not necessarily a technical thing, not necessarily like a sport thing, but just the mental toughness. And I think that's just like a byproduct of wrestling. But I think that is the most valuable thing you get from wrestling.
Well, first things first, there's nobody hating on wrestling at this table, right? Like, we are all huge fans of wrestlers and what they have to offer. I mean, like, you wrestled, you know, you did that before jiu-jitsu, you know what it's like, and we've all had a little bit of experience training it as well. But man, what you just said there about the mentality, the work rate, the pace that wrestlers can set, the mental toughness, I think you hit the nail on the head. I've got a great comment here from one of our viewers on the Facebook live chat. Carl Williamson says that, you know, wrestlers traditionally have a higher work rate, whereas some jiu-jitsu guys can get lazy. Would you guys agree with that?
100%.
That's the best part about jiu-jitsu.
That's why we like jiu-jitsu, is because you can get away with being a little bit lazy sometimes, right?
Like,
You know,
just lay on my back.
exactly. Yeah. There's that now legendary quote that, you know, your interview with Nicky Ryan. Wrestling sucks. It's really hard. It's so much harder than jiu-jitsu, and it really is, because you know it's just physically draining, taxing. It's hard.
There's no rest points in wrestling, I feel like. I mean, I'm not a high level wrestler by any means, but I feel like the minute you stop moving, the minute you stop pushing forward, you get bowled over.
That's why they only have like 3-minute matches. Yeah, you know, so.
It's constant action. But I do think you were talking about wrestling in MMA and the UFC, and I do think the era of the jiu-jitsu champion is coming to the UFC.
Making a comeback.
Into MMA, yeah. Exactly, right? It's kind of cyclical. First, we started with jiu-jitsu, and then obviously it definitely did go with these dominant wrestling champions. But I feel like we're making a return to these dominant jiu-jitsu champions, you know. Of course, our dude, Rafael Lovato Jr., holding it down out
Flying
there.
the flag.
Yep, for all his jiu-jitsu guys. Mackenzie Dern going to be champion before the year ends.
Okay, heard it here first.
Right.
Kron Gracie in action this weekend.
Kron Gracie in action.
He's pure jiu-jitsu guy as you could find, right?
Right, you gotta love what Kron is doing out there. Gary
Tonin,
of course, looking like a world beater out there. He could be champion at one or any other, you know, soon, I think. You know, a whole bunch of these guys. Ryan Hall, another guy who we've just loved watching. I think there's a lot of potential for these jiu-jitsu guys to.
Dylan and AJ slowly climbing the
There you
ranks
go.
as well.
You know, speaking of the rankings, just to remind people in case you haven't seen, if you go to FloGrappling.com and you hit the rankings tab at the top, we've got all kinds of categories and various divisions ranked. We've got gi, no gi, we got all the different colored belts, but we also have a ranking of jiu-jitsu in MMA. And that's where we took all the high-profile jiu-jitsu representatives in MMA. So that's everybody from Durinho, Rodolfo Vieira, Mackenzie Dern, right down to guys like AJ Agazam. And, you know, what we did was created like a kind of a points system that takes into account their win-loss ratio, their jiu-jitsu credentials, the submission rate in MMA, and kind of calculates a score based on that. So guys, they go up and down in the rankings after every single fight. So we should see some updates after this weekend because you got Kron and Mackenzie in action.
And Gilbert Burns was campaigning to get on the same card. He just fought the same weekend as ADCC, and he's heard there might be some shuffling in the card. He's like, put me in. Got to hand to that dude. He's an animal.
What
Such a gamer.
great representative for jiu-jitsu.
I love how
Gilbert
he
Burns.
man, Durinho keeps coming back in from like gi no gi as well, right? That's so cool. You know, he'll take whatever kind of matches in front of him. I love that. But going back to the wrestling versus jiu-jitsu thing, we actually saw a couple of viral clips over the last year or so, right, of wrestlers using what could be deemed or could be, you know, classed as jiu-jitsu techniques in matches. We even saw a kid do a berimbolo, right? You remember that?
Imanari roll and the
I don't
Berimbolo.
remember it.
Yeah.
So Imanari? Oh, that's right.
They have a name for it too, though. It's a wrestling thing. The Imanari roll has a wrestling term. Or
It really does. I didn't know
Yeah.
that.
Someone was hitting it, but it looks exactly like an Imanari roll. But
And we've even seen guys like this now kind of funky kind of styles going on. Guys are kind of using 50-50 style positions almost in wrestling. And Austin Santo ripped a Kimura on somebody once, right?
Yeah. When you see guys get deep in on a shot, and then the top guy will like jump over, you know, and pass the other guy's foot over, and so then they end up in this like weird 50-50. It looks exactly like 50-50 guard, and you do see that more and more. A lot of the Cornell guys and Penn State guys. I see a lot of those guys doing that type of stuff. We just had Sean
They're
Williams.
evolving.
Sean Williams just did a seminar with Jason Nolf just like last weekend, I believe.
Very
That's
cool.
awesome.
Same
Melding
group
those.
that did the Danaher and Ben Askren seminar. Pretty cool.
Love it.
Very unique, in the combat sports world.
I love how they're bringing those together.
Yeah, I would
right?
love
The
to have
two
been a little
worlds.
fly on the wall, see what those guys had to talk about. How,
Sean revealed to us when he's in the office this week that I think it was the Penn State's coach that's a black
Kale?
belt, longtime black belt.
No way.
No, not Kale. Yeah, he said that there's a Penn State assistant coach.
Assistant coach. Yeah.
Mhm. I'm not sure. Yeah, I'll have to
But anyway,
follow up.
someone on the staff there is a longtime black belt. So
That's interesting, man.
some dirty tricks.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, and then you got Austin DeSanto, and I see a lot of guys using that Kimura stuff. A lot of these, I remember watching the Cuban freestyle team and seeing a couple of those guys ripping those Kimuras. So every once in a while, you do see people go for Kimuras. They usually ends up with like the ref stopping the match and being like for potentially dangerous shoulder movement. But
Right. I love the way that occasionally you do see guys get choked out in wrestling, right? From like, a front headlock style position. And Dave Schultz, that was actually what he used to do, right? He used to choke people out in matches
pin 'em, yeah.
with the Schultz front headlock. But I just love the way that in wrestling that if the guy goes unconscious, they just stop the match, kind of like slap him around the face a few times, and then like, okay, go.
Bring him back.
Straight back in.
and then resume the match.
Yeah. Savages. I love it. But hey, the wrestling versus jiu-jitsu thing, I'm not done with this topic because I feel that this is something that we
Yeah,
can
me
really
neither.
explore, right? And one thing that I'm really interested to see or interested to hear from you guys is the rules. That how do we create a system? How do we create a format that allows both styles to show their strengths, but obviously offers enough weaknesses for the others to capitalize? What would a rule set look like for that?
I've been saying it all week. There's got to be submissions. So we Nicky Rod versus Pat Downing at Who's Number One last weekend was the last minute wrestling match. They had some modified rules, but it was a straight up wrestling match.
So basically, it was
takedowns.
it was a takedown match, right? I think he got tech fault.
Exactly. It was 12-0.
But there were no mat wrestling.
There was no mat wrestling and no subs allowed. And we're
okay
we're jiu-jitsu guys, man. We gotta be able to submit people. So
Yeah.
if that's not in, then it's not gonna work out great for us.
Yeah.
So how do we hybridize the two?
Well, that's my suggestion. Let's choke people.
Okay, but then that was a modified rule set with no mat wrestling. So you think that we need the mat wrestling to allow for the submissions?
Well,
or?
I mean, there was still even no guillotines allowed. So can we choke off a shot? We got to have that option, or you can jump into a
Allowed
triangle.
or not, I still think Nicky Rod should have choked him out. But
That would make great TV.
Yeah.
I do think some mat wrestling is also necessary. I mean, I would like to see maybe limited time on the mat, which would be tough for jiu-jitsu guys. Usually you need some time to work. But I also think it would be somewhat unfair if we had unlimited time to work on the ground and we could just work in our strong suit with our wrestlers completely out of their depth. But they've already won the
That sounds
match in
great.
their mind. Right?
Yeah.
They're like, what do we do now? So
honestly, this is something we've been like racking our brains about for years. It feels like, right? How to get these wrestlers and grapplers on the same mat together, and both of them feel comfortable in the rule set. The Downey versus Nick Rod match was a freestyle, more this freestyle wrestling rules match, and I feel like a folk style rules match would be a little bit better because it would allow them. First of all, it would allow Pat Downey, he has to secure takedowns, whereas in freestyle you really only have to flash their shoulders to the mat, and that's 2 points. Whereas in folk style you actually have to secure a takedown and get them on, sort of like ADCC.
it's like
where
a
you-
pin.
Yeah, where you have to get their knees on the mat for a second or two, right? Whereas for that'd be pretty hard to get Nicky Rod's knees on the mat for a couple seconds. So I feel like a folk style rule set maybe is a better place to start rather than a freestyle rule set. But yeah, and then I totally agree. We gotta have some sort of submission, whether it's only chokes maybe, or and no arm locks, no leg locks, or something like that. But I think my thing is I want to try to keep it as simple as possible. A lot of these 1 point for this, half a point for this, and then 3 points for this, and then we reset here.
Good luck with that,
You know,
man.
I feel like the more points and the more just kind of convoluted way. I feel like there's just a way. We got to make it as simple as possible. Make a way for a wrestler to score, and make a way for the grappler to score, and just try to keep it simple. Easier said than done.
What do you think, Ryan?
Yeah, kind of going off of what Reese said, it's hard. It's hard to make it perfectly so that, it's equal for both styles. Do you do, one round that's, jiu-jitsu, and the next round that's pure wrestling? Do you do a hybrid round of the two?
We saw a competition use that. So earlier this year, I believe it was in August, the beginning of August, end of July, beginning of August, Spider BJJ, who've got an event coming up at the end of November, they had a special rules match between a member of the Korean national wrestling team called Byung-min Gong and a black belt, In Sung Jan. And what they did was exactly that. First round, a straight up freestyle wrestling match. Short break in between the match. And so like the wrestler took his shoes off. And then they started back up and they did grappling rules with submission. And it kind of looked like you would expect. Basically, In Sung Jan got tech-falled in the freestyle wrestling pretty quickly. He got taken down and he got turned a couple of times. And what is it, 12-0? For
10.
tech-fall?
10,
10-0, bang, match is over. And then it went into the grappling portion. And then it got a little bit more interesting because the freestyle wrestler actually survived much longer than we kind of expected. But got hit with a savage toe hold. And done. He tapped. So it's kind of 1-on-1. But who really won that?
Right. So what did we learn? Damn it.
Yeah.
Who really won that? Like the submission in the jiu-jitsu portion or the tech fall in the wrestling? I don't know. Yeah. But it speaks to what you were saying right there. It's like if you did like one round of each, do you get a winner? Do you get a
like
definitive
a third,
answer?
like a third round of like ping pong or something? just to like.
Well, I think one round of each is there's a foregone conclusion, right? The wrestler should win 10 out of 10 times. Yeah. I mean, it'd be a shock if they didn't. In the grappling part, it is harder to submit someone that doesn't want to be submitted. If their only goal is to not get submitted, then they're up 1-0 basically, and they walk away from that as a winner. So I think hybrid rules, one match makes more sense because they're forced to go all out in that one single match. And I was thinking what Reed said about limiting submissions. I don't like that at all. I want that toe hold. Maybe no heel hooks. Like a lot of these guys that we're talking about in these upcoming matches are hoping to be in the Olympics and things like that. Like, I don't want to ruin those dreams by hurting some knees out there.
Yeah, Lachlan Giles would have loved it though.
Yeah,
Well, you want to rip somebody's toe off. You want to rip somebody's ankle.
I love ripping toes off, dude. That's my favorite thing. But I just think the more we limit the jiu-jitsu guy, the more we're screwing ourselves. Like, we got to have leg locks in there. We got to have arm locks.
I would love to see some kind of hybrid rules, maybe influenced by ADCC a little bit. I like the idea of points for mat control. And I really like the idea of points for back control as well, because I think that that's one thing unique to jiu-jitsu, but the wrestlers could also pick up quite well, because we've talked about the styles in wrestlers, right? You have some very good takedown guys, and then you have some very good, mat wrestlers. And I think it was your interview with Danaher that he said this: generally the mat wrestlers who pick up kind of, jiu-jitsu and grappling better than pure takedown guys. And there's a whole style of wrestling on the mat, leg riding, which kind of, a lot of guys will transition to jiu-jitsu pretty well. It's basically when you use one hook and you kind of use it, to sort of turn the guy, to control him, right?
So Eddie Bravo learned a lot of that, or
absolutely
developed a lot of that stuff from wrestling.
And you look at two of his most unique submissions that you associate with 10th Planet, i.e. the twister and the banana split or the crotch ripper. Those are straight up wrestling moves. The twister is a pin known as the guillotine in wrestling, and the banana split is also a pin because you get the guy flat in the back
and the shoulders touch the mat. Yeah.
Exactly. So I feel that allowing that in jiu-jitsu, if you had points for like getting the hooks in, or some kind of back control points, even if it's like a limited time, but you're able to secure the back and put the hooks in, and then you get reset after a while. I kind of like the idea of that as well, because I feel that it's something in jiu-jitsu. Obviously the jiu-jitsu wants the back, and but wrestlers could learn that pretty quickly too, right? Depending on the style.
Especially because they spend a lot of time attacking the turtle, in wrestling. So they probably have some ideas about how to do that.
Mm-hmm. What if there's like a 30-second time limit, right, on the ground? Like a wrestler takes you down, and if they hold you there for 30 seconds, then they get points or something, And so it's like you can work for 30 seconds, but then like or some amount of time, but then like when it comes down to it, if you're risking giving up the points, you can still try to scramble up and get up before points come in or something like that.
I like that idea. And I mean, we've seen in judo that 30 seconds on the ground is no no barrier to catching submissions or to scoring a pin. You just have to work really freaking hard to get it, because the intensity is just like to the max. Like, you see the judo guys, if you ever roll like a high level judo guy, their pace and their intensity is scary. It is shockingly intense, because they're just like, gotta get it done, gotta get this pin, gotta get this arm, and they'll just rip submissions on and like dive into top position. There's no slow, methodical nature on the ground. It's freaking scary when it comes at you like that, especially if you're coming at it and you're thinking you're just doing jiu-jitsu. But
so maybe like a 5-minute match would favor the wrestler, but like a 15-minute match would favor the jiu-jitsu guy. You know?
Absolutely.
So you have to try to find a good time limit too.
People often say that jiu-jitsu, it's kind of a marathon, not a sprint, right? And it's all about breaking your guy down and stuff. But especially if wrestlers are training their whole careers to do 3-minute matches, ask them to go in and do 15 minutes. It's like, I've been running back and forth to the end of the street, and now you want me to run an ultra marathon, right? That's not applicable. So
yeah, I was looking at your submission breakdown thing, and I was surprised at how many of those submissions came at like 9 minutes, 8 minutes into the match. Like a lot of submissions, like. What comes to mind? Craig's guillotine on Mason Fowler was like 10 seconds left. Josh Hinger's submission on Gabriel Almeida was like 10 seconds left. It does take some time for these submissions to materialize sometimes.
Well, I think Chase said it, right? Especially against a guy who really does not want to get submitted. They can hang on, survive for a lot longer, right? So it's tough. We got a couple of cool comments actually here coming in as well about how Ronnie DePessa says that he loves how wrestling is being talked about, and he feels that jiu-jitsu and wrestling, they have an ability to cross promote that could actually just end up helping both sports. What do you guys think about that?
100%.
Yeah, absolutely.
At the end of the day, it's what we're trying to do. I think we're based with Flow Wrestling. Those are our buddies, and there was so much fun back and forth banter just between our two teams when the super fight happened last weekend, and a lot of eyes on both social media accounts, from wrestling crossing over to grappling fans and vice versa. And yeah, I mean, we all love basically the same thing, so I think it's awesome.
Grappling other men, yes, that's what we love. That's true.
Thanks for putting it like that. Appreciate it. What do you think, Ryan? What do you think that how can jiu-jitsu and wrestling work to further the both? How can we all benefit?
I mean, in 2019, I don't think jiu-jitsu fans can ignore wrestling anymore. It's such a big part of ADCC, and all the top competitors at ADCC are constantly referring to it. You had a great interview with Keith Krikorian where he was talking about how much the mentality of wrestling helps him ADCC. You have wrestlers like Yuri that are constantly pushing the pace. So I think that every jiu-jitsu athlete should be out there learning a little bit more wrestling. I think it gives our sport more energy, and if wrestlers think that they can take top place at the podium at ADCC, like, we should welcome that.
Do you think though that a little problem with ADCC being every 2 years is that jiu-jitsu guys put it off for 18 months and they only wait till that 6 months ahead of ADCC where they're like, suppose I start training some wrestling again?
I mean, that's definitely what's happening. I think it could be a problem, but I don't know. You also get a lot more injuries in wrestling. Like, wrestling's so explosive and hard. Could you really do a full year-long wrestling camp as a jiu-jitsu guy? I don't really know. Like, maybe it's for the benefit that we take these breaks.
It's a good question how applicable it even is in IBJJF-style tournaments as well, because we don't see that much wrestling, really. We see flashes of wrestling. A guy will shoot a double, or maybe a guy will scramble out of a position using what looks like a wrestling position or a wrestling style movement. But in general, you even see that much in the gi tournaments, do you?
Yeah.
I mean, half the divisions is pull guard.
Yeah.
Lighter weights.
And then the grips, right, just kind of changes things a little bit too.
Completely.
The loop chokes, you don't want to get loop choked shooting in for a shot or something.
Shout out to Greg Melita, who's watching, and one of our buddies from Kasai, and he mentions something interesting here about how obviously the 10-point tech fall in wrestling. What do you think about tech fall existing in a jiu-jitsu format?
Yeah, it could be really cool. I mean, it definitely make things a little bit more quick, I would say.
Yeah, move the day along a little faster for sure. So, yeah, sometimes
give a sense of urgency to the match, maybe. If a guy thinks that I can get this done in 60 seconds and rack up a bunch of points and I got a lot more time to rest before the next one, that kind of thing.
I mean, at ADCC, good luck scoring 2 points, never mind 10 points.
Yeah.
But yeah, it could be good for IBJJF, but there's something about it that seems counterintuitive to jiu-jitsu, right? Because it's like at any moment I can submit you, whether
Exactly.
you have 20 points on me or 0 points on me. I feel like at any moment I'm still alive. I can still submit
10
somebody.
seconds left, I can come back and win it all.
You know, there's one format of grappling tournament that really, after ADCC, I think a lot of people are so hyped on wrestling, and they may have to wait a while to see that kind of style, you know, of grappling again, because as we were talking about, a lot of other jiu-jitsu and grappling tournaments, they're not that heavy on the wrestling. There is one style of grappling that does, though, have that, and that's the UWW style. Now, this comes around. We have the World Championships every year in September. We had it just passed, and we've had it for a couple of years now with FloGrappling. We often feature the tournaments, and they have both gi and no gi, and they're 6-minute matches. But you see a lot of high-level guys from countries like Russia and other Central Asian countries with really strong backgrounds and wrestling cultures. And you watch it, and it's like high-octane submission grappling with a ton of wrestling. And these guys wrestle first. And I remember showing a clip, actually, to a friend of mine who's a wrestler, and he's also a jiu-jitsu black belt. And he's like, his first thing was, wow, those guys are really wrestling. They're actually wrestling first and considering that kind of thing, and then looking for their submissions. And it was phenomenal to watch. Maybe we'll highlight a couple of matches at some point. But it might fill that ADCC-shaped hole in people's lives, right? Because, yeah, if you're hyped on wrestling right now, it might be a while before you get to see some good wrestling and grappling crossover.
Well, I'd expect there to be some good wrestling at Nogi Worlds, I think, just from how hyped people are on ADCC and how hyped people were on the wrestling there. I feel like we'll see some of that bleed over at Nogi Worlds. You know, of course, we'll still see a lot of guard pulling, especially in the lower weight classes, but I think we'll see some good wrestling at Nogi Worlds, maybe.
I hope so. That's coming around in December. We're looking forward to that. Another really good. Go ahead.
This is my guy right here. This
Right.
comment.
You saw
Les Blake coming in here with the step-up points being possibly a great addition to jiu-jitsu. 100% agree. I've been a champion of this idea for a long time. For those out there who don't know what we're talking about, it's, people will play the boundaries in jiu-jitsu matches, and then if a takedown or a scramble starts, they'll get reset with no points. And people can go a long way in avoiding a takedown by just being smart and tactical on where they stand on the mat. You can be penalized for this behavior, but it's not always very clear.
So
but if you have a step-out point where you force a guy out of bounds and you get, let's say 1 point, you can make that an offensive tool, and I think it'd be awesome. You'd see a lot more vigor in the stand-up game.
It makes mat control such an important factor all of a sudden, right?
Yeah, it's a thing in freestyle wrestling, right? It's kind of a thing that you would take from freestyle wrestling. They have a 1 point step out, and it's true. You can't stall. You can't wade back. You know, you can't just be on your back foot because a guy comes at you, pushes you two steps backwards. Well, that's 1 point for him. You know, so I think it would definitely change the meta game, so to speak.
I don't disagree. I'm going to play devil's advocate. Wouldn't that just end up like every contest would just look like sumo? Because if guys think, all I need to do is just push the guy out and I can get a point, does it just become a pushing and shoving match and you don't actually see any jiu-jitsu anymore?
There's a lot of great counters. You have to learn some duck unders and some fireman carries. I mean, if a guy is only moving
Collar
one
drags.
direction, then you have some options there on the feet. I think it wouldn't be negative at all.
I don't disagree. I've got to say, I'm just putting it out there because that's the first thought. Is like, you'll just have guys just push. I really would love to see that eliminated, though, of the guys just playing the edges. That drives me crazy. Really, I get furious sometimes in just watching a guy play for 5 minutes all on the edges, just constantly like using that, and every time the guy gets a significant attack, he goes out of bounds and he gets a free get out of jail free card, right? It gets reset in the middle in a neutral position, and it's ugly. And it's really frustrating to watch as well because it breaks the rhythm of the match. I think if people were incentivized, to stay in the area, then hopefully it would change things for the better.
How do you think it would change it if we started using a cage? Like in the UFC, how many takedowns come from being pinned against the cage?
We've seen it. We've had a couple events on Flow with the cage, and it does change the game, right? Guy can get double legged up against the wall, can't sprawl out, and he's in trouble there, right?
Yeah. Makes it a little harder to take the back sometimes, right? When the guy can just
way
put
harder
his back up against the cage.
Well, that's the thing. It increases the ability to take the guy down, but it actually, I think it makes it harder to submit the guy. Because if the guy is just like, kind of on his back against like the bottom of the mat and right next to the fence, and he just shells up like this. It's like good luck getting to the back. Good luck going to mount. Like the guy's just there, you know. You have to almost drag him away from the fence so you can open something up, you know. So, yeah.
How about that like pit that the karate?
Oh yeah.
Whatever that the combat
karate combat.
It's they had like a sunken like pit, right? Where
Yeah.
it's a
Bowl.
Yeah, like a bowl.
Okay, what about a moat? Right? I mean, we're talking
With
about crazy
sharks?
ideas now.
Sharks and crocodiles.
No, I mean, come on. We're talking crazy stuff now, like cage, pit, bowl, what have you. You know, like
Bears.
Wild animals roaming the perimeter. Yeah, I like that.
I do actually have a question though, about the mat though, because I've been thinking about this a lot. Square or circle? Because the wrestlers
should the mat be squared or circled?
Well, the wrestlers, it's a giant square mat, but it's a circular area, right? And if you go out of the circle, you get reset. But we have corners because we play jiu-jitsu and it's in a square, right? What do you guys think about that?
I think more mat space is
More
the
mat
is,
space in
is
general,
the is my key. So I would guess I would say square mat because I think you have more mat.
Yeah, I don't have a strong opinion. I haven't really thought about changing it to a circle. I think it changes the game a little bit, especially if there are things like step-up points or more penalties, because it is a little bit smaller and a little bit harder to get around if you get backed into that corner like that, because there isn't a corner. You get kind of stuck on either side. So,
I like the idea of a circle. I do. I think they would, especially if
I like
the
the idea
ring
of
out points
like a
were-
big ball. If them on top of a big ball grappling.
But especially if the ring out points were a thing, I think the circle is great, and I think it allows people to use the mat and control the mat much more effectively. But yes, I completely agree with you guys. Bigger mats where possible, right? Biggest,
More mat
Yeah.
space,
biggest,
or just do ADCC style and just keep it going. There's a takedown. There's no ring out points, but we're just gonna keep that moving onto the mats, into the parking lot. Doesn't matter.
Yeah, judo mats. Have you ever seen how big those are?
They're huge.
Yeah, it's like a parking lot.
Really?
They're freaking massive. Yeah, judo mats.
Jiu-Jitsu
are
guys would
gigantic.
still find a way to play the boundary on a judo mat. I'm telling
Oh
you.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Speaking of judo, just moving along from wrestling versus jiu-jitsu to judo. I went to fight
Jiu-jitsu
to
versus
win.
judo? Wrestling versus judo.
Well, we were talking about wrestling versus jiu-jitsu, but talking about how judo mats and stuff. Speaking of judo, I went to fight to win last weekend in Dallas, and great show as always. A lot of fun, really good, interesting card. We'll talk about some of the matches there in a second. But one thing I did notice was that this particular event had quite a lot of judo matches on there, and we've touched on it before about fight to win judo. It's a slightly different style to what you would see in like the IJF. You know, it's they have rules that kind of promote continuous action. They have some techniques which are permitted in IJF as well. But what do you guys think about judo on that stage alongside submission grappling and jiu-jitsu? What do you guys think about that?
You guys want to jump in?
Man, judo is just super exciting, especially when you have guys that know they're doing a super fight. I mean, judo's kind of been the redheaded stepchild of jiu-jitsu for a long time in the United States, at least. Like, it doesn't get the same love. There's not a lot of pro
Really
shows.
doesn't, right?
And so now they're there. They're on the big stage at Fight to Win, and these guys are hucking it out there. It's a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun to watch.
Who's championing judo other than Seth? You know, I feel like
In the States, nobody.
right. I
That's
mean,
the
I'm
truth.
definitely not in the judo loop, if there is a judo loop. But it seems like Seth is really carrying the torch and doing some interesting things, and not just kind of doing what everybody else is doing either in judo. He's kind of taking it upon himself to try to make it the most exciting and try to get these guys who are Olympians and who are medalists and things like that in the sport. Yeah, man, and seeing it up alongside jiu-jitsu, honestly, it's a big pop in the crowd. I feel
Really
like every
right?
time I've been there, because sometimes, especially 10-minute submission only match, one or two of them slow down and drag a little bit, and then all of a sudden you get these judo guys up on the stage, and like the crowd is like, whoa, like
Yeah.
these guys are all of a sudden feet are in the air, and it's like
Bouncing off the mat.
yeah, and so I feel like it's a good little energy pop for those fight to win shows, and I have loved watching the judo fights.
I think Seth, his background obviously was in judo before he even got into jiu-jitsu, right? And he obviously saw that jiu-jitsu as being underserved in the United States, right? That it wasn't getting the love that he felt that it deserved. And we had Travis Stevens come out to FloHQ a while ago, right? And he's been very open in his criticisms about the way that judo is managed in the United States, and that the lack of support and the lack of recognition the athletes get in comparison to some other of the stronger countries. And the results, they speak for themselves on the world stage, right? Because there have been very few U.S. Olympic judoka who have actually managed to medal. Travis is one of them, Kayla Harrison, and they've both left judo behind to go on to do other things now. But I think it's I'm kind of intrigued by the possibility that, number one, that Fight to Win could offer a platform for judo to become cool again, right? Because it hasn't been cool. It hasn't been cool for a long time. It's the kind of thing little kids do, and then you see it once every 4 years on the Olympics, and you're like, "Whoa, that's badass!" And you don't hear about it again.
Kids don't even do it anymore.
Well, no, exactly. But I mean, if you think of anybody doing judo, you don't think of IT workers and construction guys. No, everybody's training jiu-jitsu, right? Yeah. So I hope that it kind of brings a little bit of awareness back around to judo, but also offers something for the athletes right now as well. Because the next Fight to Win coming up is in Philly on October 18th. Fight to Win 128. Got an amazing lineup. We'll talk about that in a second. But very notably on that is we've got 2016 Olympian Nick Del Popolo. And Nick Del Popolo is a two-time Olympian, based out here in Texas actually, but he's going to be competing in Philly for the first time on a Fight to Win judo card. And this guy, man, 2016, just a couple months out before he's going to go to the Olympics, he has like a bunch of tournaments, not just qualifying tournaments, right? But not just to get on the USA team, but just tournaments, the world circuit. To travel around, go to these various places, to compete against other world-class judoka so that he can hit the Olympics in best form possible. And he had to crowdfund the money to travel and to compete and to survive because he was getting nothing in funding. This is an Olympic athlete. And that's kind of heartbreaking, right? That these guys are putting everything. It's their life's dream is to win a gold medal at the Olympics, and they're getting zero support from their governing body or federation. So I think it's kind of cool that, that it's almost like a professionalism, because these guys train like professionals, they get treated like amateurs. So if Fight to Win Judo can provide those guys a little something or other to compete and to help them in their careers, then maybe it'll help them go on to do other things.
Yeah, it's really hit or miss when it comes to the governing bodies, right? Unfortunately, some of them do a lot for these athletes, and some of them, kind of don't pay much attention to the athletes for whatever reason. I think, USA Wrestling had a lot of criticism, the last few years, but have definitely turned around their program, and now they support the wrestlers. I think, among the best governing bodies in the country. They really champion those the wrestlers. I mean, especially the guys who bring home medals and things like that. So yeah, it's unfortunate to see, when especially judo, man. I feel like it could be
huge,
it could
right?
be,
Could be so cool.
And it does have such a global presence outside of the U.S. Like
it's big everywhere else, right? It's huge
Massive,
in Europe,
yeah.
and South America as well. Brazil, it's really big.
You know what? I found something else, something very interesting out a while ago. I have a friend who works for the IJF, the International Judo Federation. That is the world governing body for judo and the Olympics. And the country with the most number of practitioners, judo practitioners in the world, Brazil.
Oh,
Brazil,
wow. That's
huh?
surprising.
Right?
Yeah.
Very surprising. Because I heard that obviously Japan has, that, right? That's where it came from. But very, very high population, very dense population for a small area. But the amount of people who practice judo is not that high in comparison to the population. France has a ton of judo. And it's very interesting as well because judo is subsidized by the state.
They have it good over there, yeah.
It's like insanely cheap. You pay like $1 or $2 to go and train at a judo club, and everything's paid. Like they have these wonderful facilities and like municipal sports centers, but facilities are awesome, and you just pay almost nothing to train. Right? It's a very low bar.
And the athletes are paid very handsomely.
Man, like apparently Teddy Riner, he's like one of the greatest judo guys of all time, right? Current active guy. This guy's, I think he's like a 6'7", 260 pound kind of dude. He's like an absolute giant, and he's pretty much unbeatable. I don't know the last time he lost in competition. He's like superstar status in France, huge, and he's getting paid every time he brings a gold medal home for the Olympics. It's probably 6 figures minimum into his pocket as a result. So some guys are doing really well from it. Love to see some of that here in the States as well.
It wasn't that the guy who fought Lucas Lepre in the absolute division at Europeans? Wasn't he a judo guy from France? You remember
One of
him
the
talking?
huge guys.
Yeah, one of the big
he
guys.
fought a couple of big guys.
Yeah, he did fight a couple.
Yeah.
Oh man,
I feel like
I'm
there's
forgetting which guy, but
I think he was like a judo guy. Maybe I'm wrong. But the only other guy who I know that I see championing judo is from Gracie Barra there, Jason Hunt. I see him doing a lot of
Jason Hunt. Shout out to Jason Hunt, actually. Yeah, from
I've learned a lot.
Meraki Jiu-Jitsu in Santa Monica, California.
Yeah, it looks like they have a sick judo program. I think they even have like a European judoka teaching at their Meraki program.
That's right. They've got a French judoka called Hugo Legrand, and Hugo was he was an Olympic judo competitor, very, very good by all accounts. And so Meraki Jiu-Jitsu is Kenny Florian and Jason Hunt. It's their gym there in Santa Monica, California, and Jason is a black belt, right? And Gracie Barra black belt, and works very closely with like Homolo and his guys, and it's got very close links to guys like Durinho and other guys. But he loves judo. He's like absolutely loves judo. He's got very strong judo himself. And I think that's really cool that he's created a space to offer a sort of a teaching gig, and somewhere where judo can flourish side by side with jiu-jitsu, kind of as it should be, right? It's like different expressions in the same face. Ultimately, it's all grabbing people by a gi and throwing them around. So I like that judo wrestling crossover. But fight to win, 128. Actually, Jay Regalbuto, who has got one of his guys on the card, has just told us it's October 19th. They've switched it from Friday to Saturday. October 19th coming up. Main event, none other than a rematch of the 99 kilogram and over final from ADCC. Nick Rodriguez, the baddest purple belt in the world, going up against the 99 kilogram and over champion from ADCC, Kaynan Duarte.
The baddest black belt in the world.
Gold versus silver rematch here. Submission only rules on the fight to win stage. Excited?
Can't miss that one. That's pretty fun.
Excited? Yeah, right.
Yeah, it should be different, right? This is sub only rules. It's on the stage. I'm excited to see how this one runs back again. Obviously, I think Kaynan won the last one, and Kaynan is what can you say about Kaynan, man? He's just unstoppable. But
kid just doesn't know how to not win, right?
For real. But hey, man, Nicky Rod is on a.
He loves the lights,
he's
man.
On fire.
He flourishes under the stage. So.
And I felt unsatisfied after that match. I mean, Nick was really coming after him during the final 10 seconds.
It's true. Who knows if there's 30 more seconds or however long? So we get to see the second overtime.
Shout out to Nick Rodriguez for literally competing 2 weekends. The 2 weekends immediately after ADCC. He has like this incredibly grueling kind of, path to the finals, just match after match after match against some of the toughest guys in the world, against Cyborg, against Orlando Sanchez, against Kaynan. And the week later, he's doing a wrestling, a wrestling super fight, special rules wrestling match against Pat Downey. And then a couple of weeks after that, boom, fight to win super fight. He's like, book it. He's actually competing this weekend in a super fight somewhere as well. I think it's in Houston. It's like the guy just doesn't know how to stop. That's that wrestling hustle, right?
There it is.
That's how you get better at competing, though, is competing.
Even after he lost to Kaynan, he was backstage running sprints.
That's incredible. I love that about him.
So, fight to win 128 coming up. Got some really good matches on here, actually. We mentioned about how Nick Del Popolo, the Judo Olympian, 2016 Judo Olympian, is going to be making his fight to win debut against Kel Berliner. And we've also got black belt featherweight no-gi title match. Joao Miao, the Kasai Pro tournament winner, is going to be going up against Lucas Pinheiro of Atos. Got another no-gi match right here. Isaac Bayens back on the fight to win stage. Up against Felipe Silva of Unity Jiu-Jitsu. And we also got the return of Enrico Coco, and he's going to be having a Masters no-gi title match against Mike Padilla. Speaking of Enrico, do you hear that he got hit with the pink eye?
It's moved on to Florida. Spreading,
man.
Spreading, yeah.
The epidemic that's it. It's a super epidemic, man. He Yeah,
Can't believe we all got out unscathed. You know,
Michael was convinced, right?
Yeah.
Michael, he's on vacation today, but he was convinced that we were going to leave ADCC, all of us, unable to see, like pink eye and stuff. I've never washed my hands more than I ever have that weekend. Seriously.
I basically was just coming to it as an inevitable thing as well. I was
Gonna
just
get
like,
it.
whatever, man. Just get through the weekend. You're gonna have pink eye afterwards, but it'll be fine. But I didn't come away with it.
Purella came in clutch.
It's true. It did. It did.
Yeah. But Enrico Coco, always love watching him fight. Super exciting, and Mike Padilla, that'll be a fun one. So we got Fight to Win 128 coming up on October 19th in Philly. Apparently Philly as well, one of the best crowds in the entire nation. Apparently
they
they
got
get into
United BJJ out there, and a lot of good schools that show up. Sounds like Atos, I think, has a school out there.
it. 10th Planet.
Philly?
Yeah, Bethlehem, right?
Oh.
Yeah, nearby.
Yeah,
kind of.
nearby.
Yeah. So, Fight to Win, actually, I want to give a little shout out. We mentioned about how last weekend I went to the show up in Dallas. Got to talk about Tanquinho, man. Tanquinho.
Back-to-back weekends, huh?
Another guy did back to
5 days after winning gold at ADCC. So he won on Sunday afternoon. Friday night, he's competing in Dallas. And for the Fight to Win lightweight no-gi title match. And he went up against a rematch. It was Mateus Gabriel, who he fought in the quarterfinals. You guys watch it?
Yeah, it's awesome. Crazy match. You know, Tanquinho, such a monster on top, dude.
Right.
Can't
Phenomenal.
stop him.
It's like why they call him the Tanquinho, right? He's a little tank. He really is. Yeah, he's so tough. But what do you think about that, though? The sheer turnaround 5 days later.
You gotta really want it. I mean, that's what comes to my mind. Is like, what do you do when you wake up Monday morning knowing you have to go back on the mats on Friday against a killer, against Mateus Gabriel? I mean, you gotta really have some heart.
It reminds me of what Paolo said to me, right? He said, if I win ADCC on Monday, I'll be training. And if I lose ADCC on Monday, I'll be training.
Oh,
so that's all that matters, you know, that these guys genuinely with all their heart love jiu-jitsu, would rather be doing nothing else than jiu-jitsu. So hats off to those guys living the dream.
Yeah.
Man, again, we talked about how Nick Rodriguez had a grueling path to the final and then went on to compete the next weekend in wrestling, and now he's back in 2 weeks' time. Tanquinho had a pretty tough run himself, right? He had a submission in his first match against Keith Krikorian, I believe, but then he had tough matches. He had Mateus Gabriel, he had Paulo Miao, and then he had Kennedy in the final.
Yeah.
Oh, that's like, going through them, right? It's like video game leveling up every single time. The boss gets harder.
And the oldest competitor in the division, right?
He was, yeah, the oldest
I didn't see
competitor.
Nicky Ryan
36.
competing last weekend.
But he said that he was pretty banged up after that. I spoke to him. We just put up a video this morning, All Access Tanquinho at Fight to Win, and he was saying about how the physical effects, the toll of ADCC. His neck was jacked. He trained once, in that period between ADCC and then the super fight. But
The 3 days he had.
yeah. But I mean, isn't that incredible? That's just being a professional. He gave his word that he was going to compete, and then he's right back there on the stage 5 days later and doing what he does best.
And he won.
He did. Great
Defended the crown.
Really was. So I gotta say, guys, really interesting. But there's one thing we want to touch on before we wrap things up this afternoon, and that is we got a new film coming out, right, Reed?
Nice. Let's do this. Yeah, guys. Super excited. We're going to play the trailer for our newest Flow film, the new guard, Mikey Musumeci. We've been working on this for many months now. I know you guys got the the ADCC fever, the no-gi fever, but we're going to kick things back just a little bit, and hopefully you guys remember what it's like to put a gi on, because we got this movie on the greatest American gi world champion black belt world champion that there has ever been, Mikey Musumeci. What else can you say about this guy? But just spending the time and listening to him talk about jiu-jitsu, listening to him, his perspective on jiu-jitsu. Just an incredible thing to hear. I think everybody in jiu-jitsu is gonna love hearing from him. Just like I said, his approach to his perspective, everything is very different. He has such a great perspective on jiu-jitsu, and I'm super excited to be able to share his story, and how he found jiu-jitsu, how he became, the legendary champion that he is, and yeah, really excited about this piece. We're gonna be premiering it
October 23rd.
October 23rd. Write
right.
that in your date
Coming up.
books.
There you have it, folks.
Open up your date books and
So it's basically 2 weeks.
pencil that in. 2 weeks, we're premiering this Mikey Musumeci flow film. Gonna be great. We're gonna play the trailer for you here right now.
Ooh, let's take a look.
Let's do it.
Mikey realized things that most people don't.
Mikey's very smart, like not even just in jiu-jitsu, even school-wise. Imagine like you take someone from, let's say, the highest level of education and you put them in a sport like this.
The way that he thinks is completely different than everyone else's. Mikey is the future.
We did it! Yeah, I told you. I was wrong. If you fought 30%, you win.
You're way more technical in the subconscious than the conscious. Because when you're conscious, your timing's off. For me, it doesn't even matter like what the score is. If I could get subconscious, I'm gonna get to the back.
He hasn't reached not even half of his potential.
What's your go-to defense for like arm bars and stuff like that? Memorable. Is it?
Mikey will be, for sure, one of the greatest jiu-jitsu competitors, not of his generation, but of all time.
So let's start at the beginning, Mikey.
What a unique character Mikey is,
Yeah.
right?
Wow.
I gotta say, he completely bucks the trend on the kind of the typical jiu-jitsu fighter. Just wow, what a really intriguing guy. I'm super excited to see that. And, you know, we got a comment here from Bear from Show Your Rolls Up. Quick shout out saying that Mikey Musumeci is the future of jiu-jitsu, the future of the sport. As a 3-time champion, I kind of think he's the present. He's not just the future. He's
Both.
like,
he's both, man.
he's both.
We live in
Yeah.
the Mikey Musumeci era.
Yeah, well,
Man.
there's a great quote in there from Kyle Terra where he says, you know, like, we're not going to be talking about, you know, Mikey as the best of his generation. No. We're going to be talking about Mikey as the best of all time. He's one of those
Damn.
talents, you know, like, and, you know, he's only been a black belt for a few years, and he has 3 world titles, you know, and he did it in the roosterweight division and the light featherweight, did multiple divisions. No American has ever done multiple divisions like that. You know, he told me he wants to do the featherweight division next year. You know, this guy, you know, you're talking about, he's so unassuming, and he is, you know, you'd never really expect it. He's such a killer, but there's a great yin and yang to him, because looking at him, you'd never expect it. But make no mistake, Mikey Musumeci is a winner, and he is a guy who submits people. He has a killer instinct as well, you know. So that's what I love about the yin and yang. He's one of the nicest guys in the sport, one of the most technical, cerebral thinkers in jiu-jitsu. But he can turn it on when he needs to.
Man, watching him train out there, I was present at the shoot as well. You're right, he is a killer. I mean, Mikey's all smiles and happy and friendly, but then it's time to train, and he's just going for it and not
Business time.
stopping until you're done, until you're finished, not him. So
That's really cool, man. I can't wait to see this, because I'd love to know more about Mikey's story. You know, I've learned a little bit from him, I've talking to him over the years and stuff, but yeah, he has a history going back. He started training when he was very, very young, right? Extremely young, him and his sister Tammy. And I just think knowing more about their path through jiu-jitsu would be really interesting. But also, I also think that both of them are really, really good role models, because both Mikey and Tammy, they're very studious, right? And like Mikey is right now, I think he's doing his law degree. Is that correct?
Yeah, I believe Tammy's kind of just finishing up, and you know, Mikey took a little bit different of a route, but yeah, he's in there as well.
He did a couple of years of like business administration or science, I think he did, maybe pre-med. I think he did pre-med and then switched to law, but he's definitely doing law nowadays. But I just think that's incredible that he's able to do that and become a 3-time world champion. Like, these things go side by side.
Yeah.
That's really special.
That's something Tammy talks a lot about. You know, this is the guy who has the intelligence to basically do really whatever he wants to do. You know, doctor, scientist, lawyer. You know, this guy brings that type of you know, intelligence to the table, and he chose jiu-jitsu.
Lucky for us.
We're extremely lucky that Mikey chose jiu-jitsu.
And unlucky for some, though.
Yeah.
Man, awesome. Can't wait to see that. October 23rd drops on
October
FloGrappling.
23rd, man. Can't wait for it.
Man, this is why the FloGrappling membership is so good. This is why you get all this cool stuff.
True.
Guys, very interesting debate today about Jiu-Jitsu versus wrestling. I had a lot of fun talking about that. I'm
a wild one.
sure that we'll see some more developments on this subject over the coming months, right? So, fingers crossed. But very interesting to see this new direction in the sport. Thanks once again for tuning in for this episode of Fistful of Collars. We'll see you on the next one.